Are the Sabres going to circle back around on Patrick Kane? Why I think they will, and why I think it actually makes more sense to sign him now than it did last year. All that ahead here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Jody Biasi.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Sneaky Joe DiBiase, lot to get to on today's show. The Stanley Cup Final continues. The Florida Panthers took Game 2, and they will take that series lead into Edmonton for a meeting with the Oilers on Thursday night at 8 o'clock. So we got a day off here in between the finals. They got an anniversary for the finals. An interesting question that came up a little bit earlier on WGR that relates to that. And I want to get to today some free agent options. We'll start rolling through a few different potential names the Sabres could be in on come July 1st with all their cap space. And one name is someone we've talked about a lot and have talked not for a few months, but someone that the Sabres were in on this season, and I expect them to be in on him again, and that is Patrick Kane. We'll get to Kane, what his season looked like in Detroit, and why it's a very different situation evaluating him as a free agent now as it was evaluating Kane in October. So we'll get to Kane, our first free agent option that we'll talk about before July 1st, which is only a few weeks away, just after the NHL draft. Some news from the Sabres today. Speaking of just after the NHL draft, the Sabres announcing details for development camp, which will start the first week of July. And they kind of couldn't have made a more anti-fan schedule. I don't know that you could have done a worse job at creating sessions so that the Sabres could have their fans attend at Harbor Center. Now, there's probably a good reason for why they scheduled these days at these times, because of maybe player availability or work they would do later in the day, or availability of coaches maybe. I don't know what the reason would be, but you got some tough times if you're trying to figure out a way to get down there to see Yuri Kulik or Isaac Rozan, or maybe Zach Benson will attend this year, although I probably would guess not. He would be eligible. Devin Levi could attend if he wants. Ryan Johnson might have aged out a little bit. Noah Osland, Anton Wahlberg, some of these deeper prospects that you haven't gotten to see yet. On ice sessions, Monday, July 1st at Harbor Center from 2 to 3 p.m. Not the worst. You have to get out of work real early, but it's a Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. Tuesday, July 2nd, 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Not easy to get to either. Wednesday, July 3rd, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Middle of the day. And then the 4th of July, 3-on-3 tournament on the 4th of July at 9:15 a.m. So no weekend involved whatsoever. Again, there could be availability with Harbor Center too. I should have pointed that out as a big reason why these could have been scheduled this way. But your 3-on-3 tournament, 9:15 on July 4th, when almost everybody in the world, well, everybody in the country, has plans. Good luck. But that's what you get, and I'll try to make it down there, but it's probably not going to be easy for me, and I'm sure it won't be easy for a lot of people. I bet that 3-on-3 tournament will be streamed. It often is, but we'll have you covered. We'll keep checking in on development camp and what we're going to get in a few weeks, but that's not, again, until July 1st after the NHL draft. Whoever the Sabres' first-round pick would obviously be expected to be there as well. One other thing I want to get to before we talk about Patrick Kane, it is the 25th anniversary this week and next week of the 1999 Stanley Cup Finals, Sabres and Stars, Dallas winning on no goal, a goal that shouldn't have counted. The anniversary for that is next week. Today's actually the anniversary, I think, of Game 3, which was in Buffalo. They had 12 shots on goal and lost 2-1. Sounds like a Dominic Hasek team. we got into a little bit of a fun debate on the morning show in WGR this morning about who would win a matchup between, you can put any two teams of all time against each other. What would happen if you put the 99 Sabres against the 06 Sabres? And these are the two most beloved teams of my lifetime, at least. Of course, you could go back to 75 if you want to debate who the best team ever in Sabres history is. But in my lifetime, these are the two teams. It's 06 and it's 99. 99 went to the finals. And we were playing around with that. So I'm interested from you who you think would win. Who would win a 7-game series between the 05-06 Sabres and the 99 Sabres led by Dominik Hasek? And if you need rules that kind of make this a little bit easier to digest, 7-game series, if the 99 team is home, then it's dead puck era rules. And if it's in the 06 Sabres barn, then it would be post-lockout rules. Because the one thing about those two teams, and this is a Lindy point that you could make, is they played very different styles, but they played styles that were representative of what the sport looked like at that point in time. 99 was dead puck. That was hooking and no penalties and obstruction and no offense whatsoever. That team around Dominik Hasek was built to play that way, and they went to the finals because of it. 06, again, another Lindy team, and this is, again, a Lindy point where he'll adapt to what you've got and even what the rules are. 06, they're calling a million penalties. The game's opened up. It's all about speed and skill, and that's what the 06 team was. Maybe a more complete team, the 06 team, because they also had the blue line, they also had the goaltending, and they had the offense. The 99 team did not have the offense, but they did have the defense, and they, of course, had the best goaltender who has ever lived. So let me know what you think. So far, a couple of responses. Matt texted in that he doesn't think the 06 Sabres would score. They will not score against Dominik Hasek. Hasek is that good, and he would stand on his head and stop the 06 Sabres. Almost everybody else was saying 06. If the 06 team is healthy, and like Hasek would steal a game in a 7-game series, but they're a more complete team, and they would find a way to. It would be like Dallas winning against the Sabres in 99. They would find a way to get it done. So kind of an interesting debate. Let me know what you think on it. When we come back, Patrick Kane as a free agent target, why it makes more sense to me after seeing his season in Detroit and why I expect the Sabres to be in on it. That's coming back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are brought to you on the show by Game Time. Game Time makes getting all tickets, but even NBA Finals tickets, even faster and easier. Boston's not too hard to get. It's a drive away. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, that's my favorite feature, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concert, comedy, theater, and more. Tickets are available right up to the start of the event, and sometimes they're even available up to an hour after the event. I mentioned that panoramic view you get of what your seat will look like in the app before you buy. As you're scrolling through, you'll know exactly what your angle and how high up you're going to be. See the view from your seat. Mention that. All-in prices show your total cost right up front. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back on the Locked On Sabres podcast. If you are sick, especially with the Caitlin Clark Olympic stuff right now, if you're sick of all that shouting, Fox Sports 1 or ESPN, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, free 24/7 sports streaming service. It's available on the Amazon Fire TV channels app or on YouTube 24/7. Sabres free agency. What are they going to do and what should they do? They've got money to spend. They have about, when all is said and done, what we really need to figure out is how much money their RFAs are going to cost them. Because as it stands today, the Sabres have $23 million in space. Luukkonen's going to eat up a chunk of that. And Krebs will take up a little of that. Yoki Haru, should they re-sign him, will take up some of that. Between Luukkonen, Krebs, and Yoki Haru, $10 million. Does that seem fair? About $10 million is about a rough estimate. So that leaves about $13 million left over to spend. And that's if they don't figure out a way to get out of the Jeff Skinner contract. And I came up with an idea the other day that could make sense for Skinner. There are other moves they could make as well if they really wanted to go all in and create a bunch of space. But they don't really need a bunch of space. They have enough space for a big free agent signing and then some other good depth signings as well. What about Patrick Kane? Let's recircle on Patrick Kane. He will be the number one guy we talk about when it comes to free agency. He is our first guy to talk about here on this show. Kane, we talked about him at the beginning of last season because he was available, and the Sabres basically confirmed through Kevin Adams and Don Granato, and they have connections to Kane. Adams was Kane's roommate in Kane's rookie season in Chicago. Granato coached Kane for a year and always talks about him as a pro and him as a leader on that Blackhawks team. So they had connections, and they talked about those, and they talked about wanting Kane. They basically confirmed that they wanted him, and he chose to go elsewhere. I wonder if the start of last season is different. If the Sabres start hot last year, maybe he actually signs in Buffalo, but Detroit got off to a better start, and he might have thought, well, I got a better chance to win here than I do in Buffalo, so let me do that. Takes a 1-year deal, and now he's a free agent again. If you recall, my biggest concern with Kane at the time was he was coming off a hip surgery that you'd have a very hard time finding anybody that has ever come back from it and performed. All of the examples of guys that had that hip surgery that Kane had, like Ed Jovanovski, Nicholas Backstrom, Ryan Kessler, and plenty others, they tried to come back and they weren't able to. They weren't able to come back from it, and their careers were derailed and were ended by that surgery. Kane, to his credit, he did it. Give it to him. He did it. He came back from that surgery, and he looked like Patrick Kane. His numbers look like Patrick Kane. So if the Sabres were interested when you had all that risk of not knowing what the injury was going to do to him, not knowing what he was going to look like at 35 years old after that surgery, with all that risk baked in, the Sabres still wanted him. Now, and at the time, that was within another counterpoint I made at the time to that was, well, where he's dropped off as a player is 5-on-5. It's where I need help. Where he has not dropped off is the power play. So at the time it was, well, at the least, he's going to come in and he's going to help my power play. And at the time, I was wrong. We all were wrong on this one, I think. The Sabres power play needed a lot of help. I don't think anyone thought that, though, in the first month of the season because we were still fresh off the year before where the Sabres were dynamite on the power play, had scored 1 million goals, had no problems offensively on the power play. A lot to do with Tage Thompson, of course. So then it was, all right, I've got the risk of the surgery, and I've got a guy that helps me on the power play, but I don't really need help on the power play all that much. So I was against it. The Sabres were not, though. With all of that, they wanted to do it. Now, my concerns have been answered. Well, at least the injury has been answered. And now I've got a need for power play help in a big way that I didn't think the Sabres needed back in the fall. So, and on top of that, Kane was great 5-on-5 again, was almost a point per game, 47 points in 50 games played. The advanced numbers like Kane a lot. You go to his Evolving Hockey page, and by percentile, where was he? 70th percentile on offense and actually 51st percentile defensively. I think that's probably a little bit more coincidence. He did have the puck a lot on his stick, and that would help that number too. But offensively, he was awesome. And this is why I almost would hope if they want to sign Kane, they'll find a way to get Skinner off the team. Because they are both productive offensive players. And for their careers, Kane last year a little bit is an anomaly for those defensive numbers. Kane has been a one-dimensional offensive player, as has Skinner. Pretty bad players in their own end. I don't think I want two of those guys. I prefer Kane, though. If with the money withstanding and contract stuff withstanding, I like Kane more for this because Skinner is a finisher and is an opportunistic goal scorer. He will play off of his centerman, he will play off of his line mates, and he'll do great. But if you've got to put him on a depth line, he's not going to do anything for you. And he's also not a very good power play player. He never really has been for his entire career. So in that way, Skinner is not giving me much more than the opportunistic goal scoring. He's not driving play himself. Kane is doing that. Kane is putting the puck in the back of the net. Not as much as Skinner is, but he's driving play. He is creating. He is carrying the puck. He's got the vision. He's quarterbacking the power play. Zone entries. I think Kane is a much more, well, at this point in his career, not even just their primes, because that's obvious. At this point, he is a much more well-rounded offensive player than Jeff Skinner is. And I would trust him more on a third line, secondary scoring line. I would trust him more on the top line right now. So you got to get away out of Skinner, but I think Kane is a better player if it was 1-1. I'm hesitant to say both should be on the same team, though, because if you want to be hard to play against, if you want to get even better in your own end and be a 200-foot team, I don't know that those two players should coexist on a roster. Given what the Sabres are trying to build, especially, I don't think those two players should coexist on the same roster. So if it's one versus the other, I think Kane makes a lot of sense. He's a good player right now. He was a Hall of Fame player. He's a very good player right now. And you have baggage, right? You have, getting into trouble in Buffalo way back when, and the Blackhawks once told him you're not allowed to go there anymore, and he stopped coming. And him living here, I mean, who knows, right? Like, that could go very poorly, of course. But the hockey people that are always around him talk about his leadership, talk about the culture he installs. And if you want someone like that in the Sabres room that's also productive, which is not like any of the leaders they've had in the last decade, then Kane might be your guy for that. When we come back, what would a Kane contract look like, and what could come with Kane? Just want to throw in a little bonus free agent idea of the day that could go with Kane. That's when we come back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are brought to you here on the show by Policygenius. Policygenius, a lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of the unknowns. Policygenius, the country's leading online insurance marketplace, makes choosing the right policy for your family quick and easy. Policygenius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Their award-winning agents can even walk you through the process step by step. Policygenius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over the other, so you can trust their guidance. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best for their needs. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance policy with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. Final segment here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Our first free agent idea of the day ahead of July 1st, Patrick Kane. One that's been talked about for, when's the first time Kane to Buffalo was talked about? It's been 10 years. It's probably been 10 years since this has really been something that Sabre fans have wondered. I think it could actually finally happen. Before we get to what Kane's contract could look like, what about it from his perspective? Because he said no to them. 8 months ago, less than a year ago, he said no to them. And is there anything he would have seen on the ice in the last 8 months that would have convinced him that, hey, this team's ready to win? If that's important to him, and I think it to some degree probably is, have they convinced them at all? Because I don't think they've done anything that would make that happen. Does he respect the Lindy hire in this way? I mean, I don't know that makes the Sabres any more likely to sign Kane than Granato would have, right? Like, Granato had coached Kane. They had a prior relationship, and maybe that could have been something that the Sabres used to get it over, get the job finished there. At the same time, when Kane is growing up, kind of like Alex Tuck in Buffalo as a Sabre fan, their head coach is Lindy Ruff. So if it's ever been a dream of his to play for Lindy Ruff, he could see this as an opportunity. But I'm totally guessing. I have no idea what he thinks of Lindy in that way. So from Kane's perspective, I think we have proof now that hometown isn't enough. Just selling him on, hey, come home, help us turn it around. At least it hasn't motivated him enough yet. It hasn't motivated him enough yet to decide to come here. Maybe it could. I think money is the thing. You want to get Patrick Kane to sign with the Buffalo Sabres, I think you got to overpay him. You got to give him money. And more important than that even, I think you've got to give him term. At 35 years old, how many teams are, and by the way, he'll be 36 1 month into the season, how many teams are going to be willing to give Kane a 3-year contract? That's a lot to stomach. 36, 37, 38. Those would be the 3 seasons you'd be signing up for. But I think for the Sabres to really get in the ball game here with Kane, that's what they might have to do. Because he proved, the 1-year deal in Detroit was a prove-it deal. Well, he proved it. So if he wants term, I think he could find it. I think he should be able to get it. I don't think anyone would give him more than 3. No desperate team would do that. And I think 2 is probably likely for a lot of teams, and I bet some of the higher-end teams would be offering 1. Sabres might have to offer him 3. 3-year deal, and if you look at the money that you might have to offer him, last year in Detroit, the deal Kane signed for, as I mentioned, was a 1-year deal, and it was worth $2.75 million. If you're giving him a 3-year contract, let's say hypothetically, I think you got to up that to at least 4.5. I think you probably got to come close to doubling it if you want to get him. So 3-year deal, $4.5 million. That's half of Skinner, by the way. As I mentioned, if you can get out of that Skinner contract, it's the same term as the Skinner contract as well. That's the offer I think it probably would take just to have a shot at getting him. And the question should, of course, be, is that a good idea? And I like the player that I saw in Detroit. I do like what I hear about his leadership quality. I've been yelling from the mountaintops for months now that if the Sabres need a leadership group or a leader, a veteran leader that can also perform, because they haven't had that in a long time. Someone that is a veteran leader and is good at the same time. They haven't had that. They've had one or the other. Good players that aren't leaders or leaders that stink. Kane would suffice both. So I like the player. I think what it would cost is too rich. I think if I'm going to overpay for a free agent, I want a guy that's 5 years younger, at least. I want a guy that's 7 years younger. If I'm going to overpay for a free agent, I want someone that's going to at least give me a little bit of upside for the long term. But I'm being a little nitpicky when I say that. Like, I don't need that. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for me if that's the offer they would make to Kane. So that's a look at him as a free agent. Other teams that would be interested, I saw some quotes out of Chicago the other day about a reunion there, and it doesn't seem like that's going to happen at all. There are big market teams. The Rangers could circle back and try to bring him back. The Leafs, I think, are an option for Kane. They have cap space for like the first time in a while this summer, and I think they have probably different types of players they should bring in, but I just think, for some reason I could see that as a match. Buffalo, though, I think will be in the mix. I think that Kevin Adams is going to go after him yet again. The one player, if I could live in the AI world or the fairy tale world right now, a guy that could come with Kane somewhere, even if it's not here, probably wouldn't be here. Jonathan Toews might not be retired. We don't know. Jonathan Toews took the year off. He had some health problems, and The last I read about that, it was complications from long COVID, that he is still dealing with things that he suffered after having COVID a couple years ago. So Toews took the year off, and there's been pretty much full radio silence from Toews in the last 12 months. All you really have is there was an Instagram picture a few months ago of him surfing and saying that he was doing, basically that he was doing really well. But that was it. There was no more whatever than that. So if you look at his situation, he's not retired. He stepped away to focus on his health. Where's he at in all of this? Because, hey, if I just want to play this out, this be pretty fun, right? Can Kane, hey, Pat, you want to play with him again? You guys want to finish your careers together? Do it here. Do it home. Bring him home. Like when Dwayne Wade brought LeBron to Miami, knowing these players not that good, as good as those guys. Do it. Bring him here because we're ready to start winning. And he's exactly what we need. Like, you're going to help us in the top 6 and on the power play. What do the Sabres need right now? Third line center that can put the puck in the back of the net, is very good defensively. And if you could get this bonus, someone that's going to help continue to lead the young players and be a positive force in the locker room. I just described Jonathan Toews to a T. The reason I'm not going to spend a full episode, I think, we'll see how the month goes. The reason I'm not going to spend a full episode on Toews is because I don't really see it being, there's no way he's coming to Buffalo. There is no way he is coming to Buffalo. I am creating this hypothetical where maybe if Kane is so committed to turn his hometown team around and he wants to go back there, he could convince his buddy that he won multiple Stanley Cups with, hey, come with me. They'll overpay you. They have a perfect role for you, and let's go win. Let's go turn this ship around. Let's go build a culture here before we hang them up in my hometown. That's my only way of talking about this idea is you need Kane to sales pitch it to Toews. And you don't even know if Kane's going to come. So that's why I'm not going to do a full episode on Toews, because other than that hypothetical, I can't imagine in a million years Jonathan Toews is going to come out of quasi-retirement with all his health problems, and he's going to come to the 13-year playoff drought Buffalo Sabres. Can't see that part happening. But kind of fun to think about, fun to dream about. All right, that is going to do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres. We'll talk Chandler Stevenson as a free agent idea. If you have a free agent idea that you'd like us to talk about here on the show, and move to the front of the line on some of these options that we'll be going player by player through. Let me know what you think. You can text those in. If you are not a texter already, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres to sign up. All right, that's going to do it for us today here on the show. Talk to you next time here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.